I am from Shreveport, Louisiana.
Oh, I thought the accent sounded like New Jersey or New York.
I bet.
No.
No twang, huh? This accent is loaded with sweet tea and fried food, I promise you.
So how long were you in treatment for?
I was in treatment for about 4 months. 90's kind of the standard deal, and I opted to stay another month to get my housing situation situated when I was leaving treatment, and was able to leave out, and then ended up going to work for them. And I'm kind of like a bad penny; they can't get rid of me.
How did that 4 months feel though when you were going through Silver Sands? Kind of like a lifetime, right?
It did some days.
Yeah.
Some days it didn't. You know, I had tried recovery before. I'd been to treatment before, and I did do some things different this time. And so I really kind of had a level of desperation that I'd never had before. I chose to kind of really do this thing the way somebody else told me to do it. And so it went by, but it was good because I was getting things done. Like I could feel the change happening. And so it was certainly, but again, just anybody leaving treatment, I had trepidation. Anybody that I feel like is serious about staying sober.
When you got out of treatment after 4 months, did you think you were cured?
Absolutely not.
First off, 30 days is a joke. I feel like it's probably a ripoff. You get your head sort of back on because you're detox.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's one of those things, like, I know there are certain statistics that'll say that 30 days, you know what the percentage is. I'm not even looking at that. I'm looking at the people that I've seen come in and do 30 days. And then, 3 or 4 months later, they're back doing 90. It's not something that's uncommon. And I just feel like it takes a long time to process all the stuff that we as addicts have to process, as far as pain and things that happened in the past or trauma. It takes so much for us to get through that in a healthy way. And 30 days isn't enough time to find a healthy outlet for all those feelings.
How long were you running and gunning?
I had been out for probably 10 years. 10 to 12 years since the last time I'd just been to detox.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would go to detox for a week and then get loaded in the parking lot. Total in addiction, if you throw in some treatments and some sober time, I've probably been at this for 15 years.
How did you stay alive?
That is a fantastic question. It's interesting. That's kind of something that I do every night if it's a bad day.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm sober and I'm on the right side of the dirt, it's a lot better than it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of brushes with death, and actually one of the things that brought me in to decide to come to treatment again was I did try to overdose on sleeping pills, and then I woke up and I was like, what am I going to do now? And this was really the only viable option.
That's how it was for me. I just kept waking up. I remember you're at that point where you're sitting there and you realize you're like so high and drunk, feeling like your heart's starting to slow down, and you're just sitting there in it, and you're just like, man, if I fall asleep right now, I might die. And then I would maybe do a little bit more of whatever I was doing, and then all of a sudden the next day I'd wake up face down in my closet, not knowing where I was at. I'm like, man, I can't believe I just woke up. But you just gamble every time, every night when you're about to fall asleep, when you consistently just keep accumulating more and more drugs and alcohol into your system. I don't know how I stayed alive either. I definitely had a bunch of close calls.
I mean, that's been the same for me. I would get to the point where my heart would slow down or something like that, and I was that incomprehensible demoralization that's talked about. I was right there. It's almost like if I was going to die, I welcomed it because it was my only way out. At least that's the way my skewed thinking at the time felt, was that was my only avenue for an escape from this. Sobriety, like the thought of being sober for 2 years, like that never entered my mind. That's the furthest thing that I thought would happen if you asked me this question 2.5 years ago. I'd be like, you're insane. And at the end of the day, I was the person who was saying, and my actions certainly backed all of that up.
I remember feeling like that too. I would just be at the point where it was so bad that I thought trying to get sober was impossible because it couldn't get any worse than it was. But mentally, I was so afraid of the detox and how much pain and how much work I was going to have to do to get through all that it seemed impossible too.
And like this was the furthest thing that I thought would be even a chance of happening. And a lot of that, as you mentioned, fear, going to detox. the pain that we might go through with withdrawals. And then also, like, it's a huge fear of the unknown, because all of we've known, you've been out for 10 years, I was out for 10 to 12 straight. All we've known is the drug. Like, if we can't control the outcome, we don't want to do it. At least that's been my experience. That's exactly the way I was. And so there's a huge fear involved. Well, then what my brain was doing is I manufacture fear. It starts to build, and then it becomes real. And then I act on it. Well, I can't possibly get sober, so I might as well just keep doing what I'm doing. I'm figuring out some kind of way to manage this, or at least that's what I thought, but that was completely inaccurate.
It was like a control issue in a way that we knew we couldn't control anything else, but if we put our mind to it, we were probably going to get high that day. How you would burn any bridge, screw over people, do whatever you had to do to get it. But in my mind, I was justifying it, going, the pain and guilt I'm going to feel from screwing them over is going to suck. But what's going to suck even worse is if I have to go through detox here in the middle of whatever it was that I was going through. And then I would get the drugs after screwing them over, and I would dilute all that sort of negative feeling in my void with the drugs to mask it, and then it would just keep building and keep coming up, and we got to the point where we were like, I don't care if we die.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's towards the end there, it's like I knew I was rolling the dice. I knew I was playing Russian roulette every time I would get loaded or drink. Every time. I mean, because if I got loaded or drank, I was getting behind the wheel of a car. As much as I hate to admit that, like, that's just the truth. I drove high, I drove drunk all the time. I've driven blackout drunk before. I've been on the road for 45 good minutes and woke up not knowing where in the hell I was at or how I got there.
Yeah.
It's like the last thing I remember was being pretty wasted in the car in a parking lot of the bar, and then I woke up and I'm 45 miles down the interstate.
Did you ever get in any trouble, like accident-wise, or any like legal trouble with that?
I got in an accident. I actually totaled a car, and I was high, and it was a hydroplaned, hit a concrete embankment at 80 miles an hour, blew out both airbags, not a scratch on me. Yeah, I've been in some real precarious situations. I even, kept using it. I got shot in a drug deal. A guy tried to rob me, and I wouldn't give him money. And I kind of was coming around the back of a store, and he had the door open, and I was trying to sling him out of my truck. And as he was falling out, he fired, and it just went through the meat on the back of my thigh. I had to check and see if I was hit.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was adrenaline. I drove myself to the hospital. But then I was just kind of thinking, well, shit, I wasn't able to score. It's like that's immediately where the thoughts are going. It's like, okay, I'm shot. And yeah, I'll be in the hospital for a day or two. They'll shoot me up with morphine. But what am I going to do after that? What am I going to do to find some more dope, this and that? And so, I'm already trying to work that out from the hospital bed. Like, that's how crazy it is. Like, I literally could have just got killed if the bullet's 6 inches higher.
Yeah.
Or even not even that far. I mean, in the leg, your femoral arteries there, kill you in a second. And that's all I'm thinking about.
I've already accepted that, like, I wasn't going to recover from this. And so anything I had to do to get high was okay, even if it was worth dying for. I can't say what's more insane than that.
Of course, it's the insanity that I will put that drug of choice over all of the other stuff that I care about, that I claim to care about. I mean, whatever it is, family, finances, job, anything. I'm going to put the drug above it. I'll sacrifice all of that to get it. And that is a huge part of my story, is somehow trying to change the tables a little bit. And there still has to be one thing more important than all of those things, and that's my sobriety. But I also realize that without my sobriety, I don't have all of those things, and I'm willing to throw them all in the trash can. Today, I'm willing to be grateful for them and to do what I can to keep them. And all of that has to do with me staying sober.
Do you think when you were in that active addiction that it was a choice? It was so compulsive, the addiction, that I don't feel like I could have chose to stop. When people say, why don't drug addicts like us just stop using, like, out of nowhere, like, I don't know how to explain to them to have it make sense, because it is complete insanity.
It is. It's just a compulsion that is difficult to explain to a layperson. There's a lot of people out there that, why can't you just stop? If they would take a look in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about how, people of our type, alcoholics, addicts, whatever you call it, we've lost the power of choice when it comes to drugs and alcohol, and that was absolutely true.
Yeah, 100%.
The consequences never come into play. Yeah, now if a layperson goes and makes a decision, like, all right, if I run this red light, I'll be breaking the law and the cops will pull me over for it. When we're doing what we're doing, illegal drugs, whatever it is, we're not thinking about getting busted. We're thinking about getting high. And so the consequences never come into play. And so I feel like that's a huge difference between the addict and just even a problem drinker or just a normal drinker. Like somebody gets drunk in the bar that's not an alcoholic, they're going to call a cab and they're going to go home because I don't want to break the law. I don't want to get a DWI. Getting a DWI is the furthest thing from my mind. It's just doing what I want to do. You know, and I feel like the self-centeredness manifests itself so much more with a real alcoholic or addict than it does with a layperson.
I have a hard time explaining that to certain people. When they got frustrated with me when I was in my addiction, I didn't know how to tell them, like, how, like, to make them understand, I guess, like, what it was like, you know? Because it's like, why don't you just stop? His whole life would be fixed if he just stopped using drugs. And I think that was just the first step of things that I actually needed to fix.
Of course. There's tons of things that we need to fix. I mean, if you look at anybody's life in addiction, it's almost like, you know, a tornado went through a town. Like, that's what the wreckage of my past looks like. For me, my family doesn't necessarily, they have members that don't necessarily get it right off the bat. However, when I went through the amends process and kind of talked about my part, like, hey, this is what I was doing, I'm cognizant of what I'm sorry for, it's to the point where they see some kind of change in my thinking, and so that they know that I'm moving from something to something different. So I feel like they can see, okay, there was a compulsion there, and his thinking was a certain way, and now it's a little different, and I feel like they're seeing a new side of me. Like, I wouldn't apologize for anything when I was getting high. Just like you're talking about justifying. I was a justifier. I was a rationalizer. I could come up with anything. And like we talked about, it's also difficult for my thinking in particular, being from a debate background. I can spin anything. You know, I really
That's
can.
Convenient.
I can always spin something that it's a good idea. Or I'm hurting myself more than I'm hurting my family. Oh, well, you know, or if I would take money out of my mother's purse or something. Oh, she's got plenty of money. She won't miss it. That's not the point. The point is that I stole. The point is I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing. And when I got to the point where I made those amends and was able to be honest about it, I think they realized that it wasn't necessarily the person that made those amends is not the person that was going in that purse taking that money. It was an addict under the control of something that they had not embraced. I wouldn't say the cure for, but the medicine for. You know, the prescription for my alcoholism and my addiction is the recovery that I'm doing now.
I'd say that best way to explain it was that drugs and alcohol was a symptom of the alcoholism that we had. Like, it was like a cover for the problem.
I completely agree with that.
Versus, like, using the drugs that caused, yes, they did cause problems, obviously. We had to follow through with using drugs and alcohol just to feel fine about our day.
That's 100% correct. I felt so bad about myself to the point that I started, like, recreationally using, because, like, one of my biggest things is that I had low self-esteem, and so I would even get to the point where I would buy, like, my friends in college drugs and just, like, watch them get high. Like, I wouldn't drink or anything like that in the beginning. And then I knew I was doing that because I was like, well, if I do these, I know these guys will like me. They're cool guys. And so I wanted to fit in. And then finally I just started using the drugs because it was a paradox for me to do that, because I knew in the back of my mind, well, they're just hanging out with you because you're buying their shit. And so once I realized that, I was like, well, if I'm going to feel bad about myself, I might as well do some drugs. And then I figured out that made me feel okay.
Did you use drugs because it made you feel like it was connected to, like, the good times that you had with those friends? It made you feel, like, accepted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely in part. And because that was kind of something that I never felt. However, like, when I get a clear head now looking back at it, there was acceptance all around. I chose not to look at it because once I started and found my drug of choice, there was nothing more important. No acceptance more important. I could be accepted by a room full of people, but I can point out the two who don't, and those are the two that I'm going to focus on. Well, those guys right there think I'm a piece of garbage. And that's the opinion that I'm going to take hold of, and that's the opinion that I'm going to make real to myself, because if I embrace the fact that I'm a piece of garbage, it gave me an excuse to use.
Yeah, I know exactly how that feels. You can get 100 compliments, and you can go up there, you can give your testimony, but I went up and gave mine. I got applause and everything, but I got a few looks from people that from my perspective, it was like, oh, they're judging me, and I would just focus on only those people versus everyone else that was there to be supportive, and that just sank me. I mean, for me too, it was low self-esteem. I remember the day that I was like, I'm done. Okay, I need to get on some sort of medication. I need to start taking some antidepressants. I need to get this fixed, because I didn't know how to fix what was wrong with me. And then I started drinking a little bit. Drinking turned into painkillers, and it just went on and on from there. Out of alcoholism, we did find just the best form of alcohol, which was our drug of choice.
That's right. I mean, you talk about the depression, and the hard thing to admit with that is, okay, if we've got some depression, it's like the first thing is like, it's hard to admit that I'm in some way broken, that I can't fix it, that I need a crutch like medicine or something like that. But the paradox is, we feel like it's fine to use a crutch like alcohol or drugs or whatever it is, but rather than just go to the doctor and we get a prescription for Zoloft or Prozac or whatever might help us with our depression, and it's just a big control thing. I feel like that's like, okay, I'm broken and I can't fix it. I can't control the way I feel. I can't control my emotions. And there's so much fear involved there that I turn to drugs and alcohol.
With taking the antidepressants and taking the things that I thought I needed help with, I also didn't realize that I could fix myself on my own. And I never imagined in a million years that I would actually be happy without anxiety and depression like I am right now. Up until this point, this last year, I didn't know how to fix it. It was all turmoil inside that I didn't know how to process, and the way I figured it out was vulnerability, like just getting in a group where you felt like pretty safe with people with the same relatable issues, and speaking about stuff. And sometimes you'd have to talk about stuff you didn't want to, and you can't imagine how it would actually help you. You just were supposed to be a man and not talk about your problems and just, and it all goes away.
Yeah, vulnerability is like a huge key for me being able to get sober. I had some stuff that I didn't want to talk about the past times that I'd been to treatment. And for whatever reason, like when I came to this one, I was like, okay, I am going to take a risk and put this stuff out on the table. And I talked about the issues with my sponsor and my therapist first. The next thing I got challenged to do it in my small group. I did that. And then as I started to continue getting vulnerable, it felt like vulnerability bred more vulnerability for me. It felt so comfortable to put that stuff out there for a couple of reasons. I could also maybe show somebody, it's like, hey, if you put this really hard stuff out there, you're not going to fall apart. Nobody's going to judge you.
Why do you think that we thought it would be the end of the world to talk about those things? And we probably could have saved ourselves, the alcoholism that we suffered with for so long if we were just vulnerable.
I know exactly why. Gave us an excuse.
Yeah.
It gave us an avenue to use. For instance, certain things that happened to me, I could contort it in such a way where it would make me feel bad about myself. So I feel bad about myself because of this thing or this person. So I could direct my blame at something or someone else. And then I could say, that's why I feel bad about myself. So I use. So I don't feel bad about myself. That was the convoluted way that I would explain it away to myself, that I am justified in doing what I'm doing. When nothing could be further from the truth. All of that is a delusion. Like, the truth is, I hung on to that stuff because it gave me an excuse to use.
Everyone's telling me the right stuff to do. Go get some treatment. And I didn't want to do it because I guess I liked what I was doing. And it's hard to admit that, but...
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I had to admit almost Like step 2 talks about can we believe a power greater than ourselves. When I did that, my sponsor stopped me there. He goes, do you want to know the root of all your problems? Is you think you're the center of the universe. I had a sponsor that would lay it on me real straight, and I needed that. He's like, that's the first thing that you've got to figure out, that you're not the center of the universe and there's a power greater than you out there. And so the trick was, I started looking back at my past actions. The reason I wouldn't accept anybody else's help, because it wasn't my idea. You know what I mean? It's a control thing.
Yeah. That's so weird about control, how we needed it so badly. What it did for us was mostly all negative, because nothing's gonna work out the way that you want it to, picture perfectly.
Not never.
But I don't know why we assumed that that's what we needed, because once I gave up the control, like once I let go of things that I felt were toxic to me, even though I felt like holding on to them somehow would give me relief about certain things, all the healing took place. Like, I don't know, I kind of just let God auto-correct what I was doing, and then now I'm off feeling way better in here, and that's what everyone was telling me all along.
Yeah, I have a really interesting relationship with control. Once I finally realized that control was really an illusion, then I was able to start to do some recovery. Because I'm the type of person, because I feel bad about myself, if there were 6 people in this room, I'm going to be 6 different versions of myself to each of those 6 people, because I'm going to try to fit into the box that I think that you like or will approve of. And I'll be 6 different versions. And that's not honest. And so I like to try to control people's opinions. I have been told, and I agree with this.
But we don't even really know what people think about us.
That's right. That's why control's an illusion.
Yeah, we don't.
Because how would you ever know? Really?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much fakeness about the way people present themselves nowadays, especially out there in the world where, people have the same issues that maybe we had, but they are just using alcoholism in another way.
I say the Serenity Prayer every morning. I remind myself about control every morning. You may have heard this in my testimony. My sponsor had me get a hula hoop and put it under my bed. He said, get it out, get it on your knees and do the Serenity Prayer. So I did it. He's like, call me when you're done. I was like, okay. I called him. He's like, you know that part at the end where it says, and the wisdom to know the difference between the things you can and can't control, I'm about to give it to you. Everything I cannot control is outside that hula hoop. The only thing that's inside it is me. The only thing I can control is my attitude and my actions. And my attitude, some of the times, he explained that, yeah, somebody might do something that makes me angry. However, it's the action after the anger that I can control. It's how I deal with the emotion or the things that I can control. And once it was made that simple for me, it seemed to stick. Like, yes, it sounds ridiculous. I felt ridiculous leaving Walmart with a pink hula hoop to put under my bed.
But it was effective. I heard that. I heard that analogy right when I was in early recovery too, and I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, you could call people, and you could, inside that hula hoop, you could still do. And now I realize you can't control anyone or anything.
No.
Even with what we have going on here with COVID, and everything. It's like, well, what are we gonna do with it? I'm like, well, what can we do?
Yeah.
Just do what you can in the present moment. Mindfulness also contributes to that, knowing that I can only fix this moment right here,
That's
and
right.
I can only do what I can.
Yeah, neither one of us are going to be able to come up with a vaccine for the coronavirus right now. So what can we do? We can be mindful, try to follow the rules laid down, try to practice the social distancing, the hand sanitizing and all that. But those are things we can't control. I can't control the other people. I can't control whether I do end up getting it or not. So once I can leave it up to my higher power and I just gave it up to God, it makes it a lot easier to go through the day without that fear.
It's so much more productive too, like being able to use your head without having to focus on all that fear and anxiety that it was completely counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it stopped me from becoming who maybe, I don't know. I feel like God had this path plan for me, like the way I'm on, but sometimes it's hard for me to accept that. Like, what if I wasn't an addict? What if I didn't have these problems? Like, what if right now 10 years ago, like, what would I be, from if I didn't have to deal with any of that? But I just accept that this is what I'm supposed to do.
That's right.
And I'm okay about it. And it's so weird and ironic that I'm the one trying to help people with.
Of course, I mean, I wasn't in a position to help anybody, a couple of years ago, and it's a huge message of gratitude for me, and it makes me hang on to what I've got so much that I am not only in a position where I can help people, but I am the type of individual today that I do actions that do help people. Not only does my job offer me the opportunity to do that, but I'm the type of person that is capable of doing those things. And I've seen it. And that makes me feel good because you know what? I'm just being honest with these people. I've got sponsees and I'm just honest with them. They may not like it sometimes, but I sponsor them the way I was sponsored. I lay it on them straight. I try not to, throw any pixie dust in there is what my sponsor calls it when I would try to spin a bad story into a good way and, try to rescue myself. He's like, no, don't blame somebody else. Just lay it out there. What did you do? And it's the same thing I do with my guys because there's no reason to worry. All of that stuff doesn't matter. It's all about me and my recovery. And so I need to talk about what I did, what I need to make amends for. Because anybody I'm blaming, A, they'll probably never know. And B, they dang sure ain't gonna come make any amends for it if they really was blamed there. And so it's just like banging your head against a brick wall because that's something that is outside my hula hoop. What I can control is if I can get to the point where I can admit the nature of my wrongs and say, hey, this is my part. This is how I wronged you, and I would like to not only apologize, but I would like to ask what actions I can take to make amends for it.
How have your amends gone when you try to make them?
They've gone pretty good. I can't complain about that. I've had a handful of people, feel like, yeah, you wronged me, but most of the ones are just, what can I do to make amends? Stay sober. Be a functioning member of society. Like sobriety offers me the opportunity to be a better brother, a better uncle, a better son, and that's what they want. That's what my family wants. They want me to be emotionally available. They want me to be present for certain things. And sobriety offers me the ability to do that. I wasn't able to do that when I was drinking and using because I'm not even thinking about them in terms of, well, I got to make sure and get to Christmas dinner on time, even though I won't be able to meet the dope man. No.
No.
I'm definitely going to meet the dope man first and be late.
Well, every year almost, I'd say I had to go meet the dope man on Christmas or have him drop it off. It's like, wow, Merry Christmas,
Yeah.
And I would actually be trying to not be so high around family and and they all knew. And it's I have to forgive myself for that kind of stuff. It's tough. It's not like, I don't know, it's not easy to do, but right now I think that they've seen the change in me so much and my actions.
That's the thing.
The doing the next right thing and how, my life's starting to, unfold and I'm starting to get a lot of great opportunities with certain things I never thought I'd have. And, they're just, they're happy for me, and I think they forgive me.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I had to learn to forgive myself and evaluate my actions at the end of the day. Was I acting like a good son, a good family member? If the answer is yes to that, I'm doing the best I can that day. I can't control when that actual forgiveness happens, but all I can control is my own actions that can help push it to that point. And if my actions of being the emotionally present, calling my mother, calling my sister, seeing how they're doing, that's little stuff, but that's the type of stuff that I would not do when I was getting high. It boils down to almost just doing something different. And I know that's a cliched term, but that's really what I had to do.
It's such a big thing, though.
It is.
It's just from what we've known and how we reacted compulsively for so long to everything. And I don't know if you guys learned about cognitive behavioral therapy. Once I visualized that and put it out in my head, like the triangle from your thoughts and your emotions and then your actions and how it just kind of moves like that, I actually use my second thought. Like I call it second thought. Like before you react, when you have a thought to something, you analyze it. You almost like put it on the wall and you go before you say something, before you just, because I just compulsively react for so long and it caused so much destruction that now doing the next right thing and thinking a second before I say something maybe that might hurt someone's feelings or something dumb. I just analyze it out, and it's honestly just paved the way for a much easier, less stressful life. And I don't know how to say it more simply to do that.
Yeah, like my thing with that is like my sponsor kind of turned one of my character defects and he showed me how to make it an asset as far as that goes. When we talk about, feeling, thought, and then an action, we have to think about the fact how good manipulators are we when we're active in addiction. We're pretty damn good.
Because it was do or die.
That's right, because it was out of necessity. However, we can use that ability to analyze people in certain situations to come up with a different outcome. I don't necessarily have to manipulate them, but I have to use the same tools that allow me to read those people and think about my feelings. Not necessarily, but I'm not taking an action to get the result that I want. I'm trying to take an action that is just the next right thing. And if I can use that ability to process my feelings and process my thoughts, I'm able to do the next right thing.
The next right thing is probably going to be the harder way to do something. It's going to take a little bit more work, maybe make me step out of my comfort zone a little bit. And stepping out of that comfort zone, getting out into the real world, speaking to people in meetings, making those amends, even though some of those were very hard. Like you'd rather, at a certain point, I would have rather died than having to go back and make them. And getting out there and doing the hard thing is, you grow so much from that. Like, I mean, my girlfriend and parents live in Las Vegas still, and I visit them every now and then, but I have a dog there. I'm here. I've been here for the last year. I decided to move here and stay here just because, like, I want to be around recovery people, and I got a fun job, and I'm happy. And I didn't, it'd be easier to go back to them and to make it comfortable.
100%.
But you have to make the harder decisions sometimes, and that's something I could never do and understand until right now.
No, like all us alcoholics and addicts are by nature easier, softer way kind of people. I really believe that. And I liked how you mentioned about being comfortable, because my sponsor put it to me like this. When I did 6 and 7, admitting all my character defects and then asking God to remove them, he's like, now let me make sure you understand what you're asking God to do. When I think about all our character defects, rationalization, justifying, manipulation, all those things, we all use those things as defense mechanisms to try to get what we want, which was not something great. To get the drugs. He's like, all right, you're about to ask God to remove all those. So that's almost like you're willing to go and take a knife into a gunfight, because it's like all our armor's stripped away. It's just us. It's just who we are. And so he's like, that sound uncomfortable? I was like, well, yeah. He's like, I'm going to tell you, you know what the opposite of comfortable is? Character building. Do you want to be comfortable, or do you want to build some character? And you know what? Once I got uncomfortable, it enabled me the ability to build a little character. And it was nice to know, because once I built a little character, I realized that those type of traits were within me all along. That the drugs and alcohol prevented me from using them and bringing them into the light and bringing them into my personality. And once I realized that, it was great to be able to feel better about myself. It's hugely uncomfortable to do a lot of the things you talked about. I could have went back home, but I'd done that every time. So that was comfortable to go back home when I got out of treatment. We've got a family business there and everything, and it was suggested and brought up that I might stay out here. And at first I was like, oh, no, hell no, I'm not doing that. And then I was like, just think about it. And I thought about it, and like life's worked out great since I've stayed out here. I like it out here. I've got a job that I love. I work with great people, and it allows me to help people.
Yeah, you get to help people that were in your same situation, and on plus side, you paid for it. So, that's always a good thing. But I remember doing 6 and 7 the first time. I just did it because I felt like it would cure me if I did the steps. Those were the big ones.
That's what I feel like too. Like a lot of 4 and 5, like get the publicity, it kind of seems like, and get the label that they're harsh. 6 and 7 were the biggest deal for me. Like that's where the rubber really met the road.
Yeah.
I say the 7-step prayer every morning, and like the very first part, like if you want to talk about the risk that is involved in the complete action of letting go of control, it says, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. So you're just giving it all up. Like that's a lot. That's a lot to undertake at, when you're 2 months sober or something like that. It's like, all right, so I'm just going to totally give up control to everything. But I found like the more I did that, but I did have to do it every day because I'll take it back at least once a day.
I'd say the first 90 days of getting sober, you're still having that compulsion, and your brain's not like set
right.
to where you would want it to be, or at least even feeling like you could be considered normal up there. And then after that 90 days, I feel like you still have compulsion and stuff, but then it becomes we get that choice back. I feel like 90 days is the minimum, and so I like that 4 months over at Silver Sands because I did 90 out here and realized I couldn't go back to Vegas yet, and so I stayed out here for another 3 months for sober living, and then I moved in with a guy that was in the same program. We got a house on the same street as the house that we stayed at.
Okay,
so just right down the street. This year has kind of flown by, and I needed it. I needed to be here. I couldn't have considered going back.
Yeah, if I'd have went back home, I'd either be back in treatment, dead, or using right now. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't have a lot of doubt about that. Like, I feel like that's a fact for me because, like, all the evidence is there to say that it is. I get out of treatment. I go back to Louisiana, what's familiar, what's comfortable. And I do that after, 90 days, 4 months, sometimes 6 months. And it's interesting, we're told that, like, it takes a while, but at some point, our neural pathways in the brain will remap. And so it was 16 months from the day I got out here until I went home to see my family. I didn't see my family for 60 months, my healthy friends that I had. And one of my real good friends, I probably went to her house about 5 out of the 7 days I was home. I drive right past some apartments that I literally picked up at least once a day.
How'd you feel about that?
I didn't realize I'd passed them till the 5th night when I was leaving the night before I went home.
Yeah.
So I was like, holy shit! I've passed these apartments probably 10 times since I've been home, and I hadn't even given it a second thought about not only getting loaded, but a second thought about that they were even there. And the thing about it was like I could get into those apartments blindfolded.
Yeah.
When I was using, and that really was a huge deal for me. Like, it made me so grateful for my higher power and so grateful for the choices that I had made up until that point because I feel like it was just the evidence that my higher power had removed the obsession from me. It's just a set of apartments. I didn't realize it until, almost when I was ready to leave. I was like, oh man, those are the apartments. I used to pick up at those all the time. But it didn't matter anymore. I had no desire to use. And that is just a 180-degree contrast from the way things were 16 months before.
I used to use at my girlfriend's house when I would live there with her and try and hide it in different places. And there's like a bathroom in there that I would hide stuff in, leftovers of my drugs, if there is such a thing. Now I go back and I stay at her house and I go into the bathroom and I'm looking around and I'm seeing all the same stuff, kind of like stepping out of a dream or something, because you're looking at it, you're like, I can't believe that I had that compulsion at one time, just associating drug use with this place.
It's amazing how they just kind of fall away and we don't know it. Like, I didn't know when that happened, that the obsession necessarily had to be removed. I mean, we're the type of people that's got to see some evidence of something. And then I got the evidence. I don't know if I needed it at that particular point in time, but I do believe that was the time that I was supposed to realize it. I haven't obsessed about getting loaded for I don't know when. Like, I can't remember the last time that I was really craving. Like, I've had some bad days, but I haven't got to the point where I want to get loaded because I think I've finally, taken hold of the fact, not even the notion, the fact that there is one surefire way to make this bad day worse is that for me to go drink or use. 100%. And I'm sure probably when you did step one, you had to write down some of your consequences.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I've got them written on a little sheet, typed up small and laminated that I keep with me sometimes. And if I ever get that compulsion or think about it for a second, so it's like, okay, this is the stuff that is going to happen or worse if you decide to use. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact. That's all stuff that has already happened and it's going to happen again. It's happened multiple times, just about every time that I relapse.
I have a list about what I'm thankful for, and it's pretty much what you were saying, because I'm thankful for these things that I have them now, and I realize that I won't have them if I go back out and start using. I mean, of course, we have bad days. If I was to take some pills, then that would give me relief. Or I'd take a shot or something, it would relieve the problem I'm having. And I think sometimes that thought will pop into my head, oh, if I was to take something, it would go away. But then I realized, like, what good would that do me? Like, it would only affect me negatively. And I know as soon as I take something, my whole brain chemistry is going to try and shift back to that addict mentality, and then I'm gonna lose all the good stuff that is going for me right now. And I'm like, is it worth it? Yep. And I cannot justify it one time saying that, like, there's a reason to use now.
100%. It's an extremely difficult decision to make. So like, okay, I'm gonna do this selfish thing, knowing that I'm gonna break my mother's heart, break my sister's heart, probably lose my job. And so when I frame the decision up like that, it would seem insane to make any other decision other than say, I'm not going to use. And I have to frame it up that way. Because in a vacuum, sometimes it's not as easy to just say no. So I have to frame the decision up like, okay, if you do this, all of this stuff is going to happen. Just like you're talking about, the things you're grateful for, I am going to lose all of that. And then all it takes is for me to relapse that one time. There's no even thought about whether or not I could get away with it. If I got away with it, that'd be the worst thing that could possibly happen. Because the type of person I am, and most addicts are this way, if I get away with it, I'm going to do it again. Mm-hmm. We habitually push things to the limit of consequence. That is part of the definition of being an addict or an alcoholic. We drink and use to the point of consequence. Whereas the normal drinker can have a couple beers, get a buzz, and go home. I don't do that. I drink and use to the point of consequence, plain and simple.
That's the only thing that would justify us to even consider stopping. I knew one day I was going to get in trouble or die, and I kept thinking, like, oh, well, I'll keep getting away with it. I'm good at this. I know how to do this to where it won't affect anyone around me. I would justify it like that, too. No one's even going to know that I'm using, so how can I be hurting anyone? I'm just getting the relief that I know I need and also deserve. Think exactly. Of that. That's the logic.
That's the logic. And that type of logic, and I had to realize this for myself, and because it was pointed out to me like a sledgehammer from my sponsor. He's like, you're living in delusion. You might as well be living in fantasy land. If I really think that it's not going to affect anybody else, that, nobody's going to know, like that is a fantasy. The difference between self-will and God's will is God's will is living in the moment and self-will is living in the fantasy. Mm-hmm. My self-will, if I wanted to get loaded, would live in the fantasy that I'm just going to be hurting myself, that nobody will find out. Oh, it'll be different this time. That's a fantasy. The only kind of different it'll be is worse. That's been my experience. Every relapse has been worse. Like, that's a fact. And so there's so much evidence to point out that if I do relapse, it is going to be worse. I'm probably going to die. I can't give you any good explanation why I haven't already. I'm extremely thankful that I haven't, and so that's why I say I'm grateful to just, like I said earlier, be on the right side of the dirt.
I feel like even when we're stuck in this pandemic and we're not having meetings and we're not able to go out and communicate as much, there's a lot of people around here relapsing, and we built our whole sobriety around our routines and how we actually had structures to our days.
There's so much that can be learned from being able to stay sober through a situation like this, though. We talk about being uncomfortable. This situation is uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody likes being cooped up at home, addict or not. Nobody. But if we can figure out how to stay sober through this, it's like, I stayed sober without. There's two ways to look at it. You'd be like, oh, well, I was able to stay sober and there weren't any meetings going on, so people can say that they don't need it. Or you can take hold of it. It's like, you know what? I found ways to continue to strengthen my foundation for recovery, even though there were no meetings. We'd do Zoom meetings. I call my sponsor about twice a day now, because I need it. I need that type of connection. There's a lot of people out there who's like, well, why is this happening? And such as that. And we can think about a lot of things in our addiction that are the same way. Why don't I have this? Why don't I have that? Why do they have that and I don't have that? At the end of the day, the why is not important. The important question for me to answer was, what are you willing to do about it? And so I was willing to get uncomfortable. I was willing to get vulnerable. I was willing to stay in a place that wasn't my home and try to make a life for myself, and I was able to do that. Once I figured out that I could get uncomfortable, do something, and it could work, it makes it less difficult to get uncomfortable. And uncomfortable is kind of the place that I have to be for my recovery to grow.
Yeah, we kind of get comfortable with being uncomfortable in a way. I love to, go out and push myself now. I mean, like, I'm doing things that I never thought I would get to do. For some of the guys from Elements, for Earl's third year sober, we went skydiving as like a little group, and there's no way I would have been able to go skydiving in the past. I would have been either used all that money to go out and spend it on drugs and get high a different way.
Exactly.
Or I would have had to take enough Xanax to where I wouldn't have even, remembered it. I just been flopping out of the plane, like, passed out. So it's just great to be able to enjoy this stuff.
The thing that freedom and sobriety is almost as simple things that I've got options today. I can make a choice. Like, I have that power of choice because I'm not drinking and using anymore. Like, I can choose what I want to do. I'm at a job that I really like doing. I choose to continue working there. I choose to help people. I choose to do the next right thing. Whereas when I'm actively using, there's no choice involved. It's like, okay, well, I got to make sure I get some dope before I go to work. I got to make sure.
That's a must.
That's what I'm saying. Well, you got to figure out where you're going to get the money for it. So, like, your day is totally dictated. New freedom and a new happiness is the fact that I am unshackled from something that I used to be chained to. I'm not chained to that anymore. It's like I'm real attached to my recovery because I choose for it to be that way. I choose to try to help other people. I choose to try to be a functioning member of society, and I choose to take the actions necessary to make all of those things happen. For anybody that's new out there, or maybe you've tried this several times and you're coming back, just give it all up. How it works, if you read it through, it says we tried to hold on to our old ideas and the result was nil until we had let go absolutely. Let go of those old ideas. Trust in some of these people that have been able to do this thing, that there is a better life out there for you. There's a better life waiting out there for all of us. I've been able to find it. Kyle's been able to find it. And it's a lot better than the way that I was living before. And to just give it all away. It says half measures avail does nothing. It wasn't until I worked the steps the full way through and did it with everything that I had and laid everything out on the table, I got the results necessary. We hear the promises at every meeting. They do come true. And so I would just like to offer anybody who's struggling or anything like that, if you ever see me at a meeting, talk to me. I'm happy to help you, let you know how I did it. Maybe we can figure out a way that you can do it. And I can try to help you along the best I can, or get you connected with some people that can certainly help you along the way and stay sober. There's too many of us dying out there to not do something about it. I can't ask myself, why did this person die? Why did that person die? If I ask myself, what can I do about it? The best thing I can do is our primary purpose. Stay sober and try to help another alcoholic.
That was solid, man. It was great to have you.
Yeah,
on,
thank
man.
you very
You
much.
had a lot of great stuff to say.
Thank you, my friend. It was great.
And season 2, episode 2, Anderson. That's a wrap.
Thanks, guys.